Okay. Theme music cued.
Everything's cute.
What was that clip that we're not supposed to swear in the air and it's screaming motherfucker?
Let's not reference it.
Okay. Just for YouTube.
Actually, this is Silver Lake, so we can go right into something.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm turning us on.
Sure.
Good afternoon and welcome to Cinema Smackdown. We are back on the air. Can you hear me at all, Shane? Oh, there we are.
There we are.
Yeah. That's what happens when you turn down the sound. So, we're back. That was What's Your Frequency, Kenneth by R.E.M., at least a tiny clip of it. I was inspired to play a little bit of that because it plays at an odd moment in a movie that Shane and I both saw recently called Under the Silver Lake, which we're going to get into in a few minutes.
Yeah,
So,
if you haven't heard about it, that's why we're talking about it this week, because there's a lot of interesting films that came out this year that no one really bothered to talk about.
That's very true. This week being... What's the date today? It is the 30th of December.
Oh, this hellish year is almost over, thank God.
I'm Michael Brody. I am ably joined by my co-host Shane Simmons. This is Cinema Smackdown on CJLO 1690. And today we're going to do a little chat about unappreciated or unsung films of 2018. I believe this will be part one of 2 to 3 parts.
Yeah, we may rattle on for weeks on end like this. There's enough interesting little films that came out this year that'll keep us going the same way that Marvel movies kept us going for, I think it was a 6-month spread, if I remember correctly.
Well, considering the episodes that we missed, yeah. I think we did 4 parts of Marvel movies, which...
Something like that.
Looking back on
it was interminable.
Looking back on it, I'm kind of...
I deeply regretted even suggesting that.
I mean, it was an easy topic to keep up with. We compared and eviscerated different films. We praised some.
I think over the course of us discussing it, 3 more Marvel movies came out.
Yes. Yeah, Shane, I'm going to let you vamp for a second because I just realized. You know what?
Do you have to go to the bathroom?
Nope. I will share a little personal history from today. So today I got up early and went to a party, and so I've already been drinking. So
you do have to go to the bathroom. That's
my excuse for anything I do that's wrong today. I've had a couple drinks. And it's 2 p.m. here in Montreal, but I've had a few.
Aren't you supposed to be not operating heavy equipment like a radio station?
Like a radio station. I mean, admittedly, the radio station is on my back as we speak. But it does occur to me that as we are
if you hear beeping noises, that's the radio station backing up.
I have done nothing to prepare for our ad break, which is coming in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to let you begin to talk a little bit about Silver Lake while I pull some clips.
Oh, God.
Good with you? No,
so you've left me... Yeah, no, please do. But, I mean, you've left me with probably the most complex film that we're likely to talk about to go solo on here.
Don't worry, I'm nearby, ready to jump in at any moment.
Yeah, you're going to need to save me here because...
I've got notes.
You've reviewed it, re-reviewed it more recently than I have.
True.
And it is... it's a little Andrew Garfield film made by the guy who did It Follows, and I don't know his name off the top of my head. Perhaps you do.
It's David Robert Mitchell.
Okay. Certainly a relatively new name to watch. His films have thus far been quite interesting. I was a big fan of It Follows. And when I found a copy just lying around somewhere of Silver Lake, I started watching it going, I don't even know what this is, because it was mislabeled. And by the time I realized, oh, right, it's a new film by that guy, I was quite into it. It was...
that's right, yeah. I mean, I think you explained it well enough, but I'm still going to reiterate what you just said. I thought this was funny. I mean, this is what happens in modern life. We get movies, we stockpile them, and then we put them off to the side, and sometimes they're not properly labeled. I mean, this is just a fact of how things happen. If we're not on Netflix...
Right.
Then, you know,
or a legitimate source of movies. Not that we would ever use an illegitimate source to get our movies, but...
Right. But the point being that you mentioned this, that you had stockpiled this movie, and then one day we're looking through your things and realized, oh, this isn't really labeled, or maybe it had two initials. Might have had.
It was one of those, something like that. Yeah.
So you popped it on just to catch the title and relabel it.
Yeah, and it's one of those films that doesn't show you the title until the very end. So I was about 20 minutes in, going, "What the hell am I watching?"
I mean, that's delightful, I have to say.
And it's a great film to just turn on and go, "What the hell am I watching?"
Exactly.
Other than, well, I recognize Andrew Garfield. Beyond that, I am lost. What is this film?
Yeah, so no, I'm really delighted that happened.
And the journey of discovering what it was a lot of fun, because for quite a while I'm going, okay, this clearly seems inspired by Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe type L.A. mystery adventures, even though it's about a slacker loser who can't make rent. He is basically a Philip Marlowe stand-in type of character. And then we get a little further, and there's some Hitchcockian stuff. And you go, okay, yeah, there's definitely a Hitchcock flavor going on here. And then the stranger it gets, the more you realize, oh yeah, and here comes the David Lynch stuff.
Well, you know what? I think an easy thing to say would be David Lynch, right? Everybody, you see something a little strange in a movie, an odd tone, a bit of darkness, oh, David Lynch every time. I will tell you what this movie really reminds me of. Admittedly, these two things are sort of David Lynch influenced. But what it really reminds me of is a live-action version, to some degree, of tonally, of Charles Burns' book. You know who Charles Burns, the cartoonist, is?
Right.
Well, he did a comic book, a big, fat graphic novel called Black Hole. It reminds me a little bit of that, and it also reminds me of, and I know you know this one, Dan Clowes.
Oh, yeah.
When he did Like a Velvet Glove, Cast in Iron.
Yeah, yeah.
The stories from the original 8-Ball comics, it's really similar to that tone. We've got general weirdness, like a squirrel puppet in the opening scenes that just feels out of place in any movie. A dying squirrel puppet?
There's one of the first things that happens in a movie is a squirrel falls out of a tree directly in front of Andrew Garfield and hits the pavement and is a rather gory mess and looks kind of puppetish. It's a pretty good puppet, but
But it's clearly a puppet. There's no
Well,
guesswork.
I think it's supposed to be a squirrel. It's just that, they used a puppet rather than mutilate an actual squirrel. Or thank God they didn't CG it.
Or thank God they didn't really kill a squirrel for the scene.
Yeah.
Which I do debate the concept of in a movie called Killing Zoe, where they have a dead cat, which I have been reliably told in a commentary track by the director, they used a dead cat.
Oh, I can get you a dead cat. Give me an hour or a toe. Do you want a toe? I can get you a toe.
That's what the prop department told him. Well, we can get you a dead cat. What color do you need? Apparently, they had a warehouse full of them.
Well.
I'd say Welcome to France, because the movie takes place in France, but it was actually shot in Hollywood. Despite the entire film taking place in France.
A warehouse full of dead cats. Are you sure it's not run by Amazon?
All right, let's go. Ooh.
Because when I order dead cats, I'm just saying, I usually get them from Amazon.
That's a damning concept, considering that they are your bread and butter company at this
moment.
Yeah,
better swallow that particular endorsement.
Yeah, don't bite the hand that feeds you, if at all possible. So, we were talking about Under the Silver Lake, a very, very strange movie, which has an interesting history. Now, here's the thing I really like to mention to people before I tell them to embark on this film. The movie Under the Silver Lake is 2 hours and 19 minutes. And I saw it this summer at the, I don't know if it was a world premiere, but it was certainly a premiere at the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal. And I really liked the movie. And it is way too long. However, as I said to the person I saw the movie with, I said, I think this movie's an hour too long. And yet, I wouldn't cut a minute of it. I wouldn't cut anything. It
may be 2 hours and 19 minutes, but 2 hours and 19 minutes of stuff happens in it.
Yeah. It is in no way...
It doesn't feel like a lot of filler.
Yeah. No, I'd say there's no filler in this movie. That's the thing. I wouldn't be able to pick a single scene that I think needs to be removed. Now, this is one of those weird movies. It's so strange and so uncomfortable in places, and so, where is this going?
Yeah, it's wonderful to sit down to a movie occasionally and really have no idea. I don't know where this is going.
And it chooses all kinds of strange things. I'm of two minds. I cannot recommend this movie enough, and yet I have to warn people. you're going to hate this.
Yeah,
A lot of people.
most people, yeah, you will probably hate this movie.
But it's so interesting, and an interesting film trumps a good movie in a lot of cases, especially a generically good movie,
Even if I had hated it, I would come away going, yeah, but I'm going to remember that.
Of course.
And I didn't hate it at all. I quite liked it.
So, as Shane was
I
saying...
plan to show it to people who will end up hating me, as well as the film.
Yeah, but I think in context, so I saw it at Fantasia this summer, last summer that is, and I quite enjoyed it, and then it was supposed to come out, I want to say it was supposed to come out in September, and then there was this announcement. Film's been pushed back, it will be released in December or January, right at the end of the year, beginning of the year, and that was not a great big vote of confidence, obviously. So...
Yeah, well, they know. It's one of those films, just, even though it was relatively inexpensive to make, it's kind of box office poison, ultimately.
Right, but it was still destined for theatrical release. Around comes the 1st or 2nd of December, bang, it is dumped unceremoniously online on, I'm going to say, iTunes and other places. So that was a shock to me, because I really thought that they were holding it for theatrical, having pushed it. And it seems like they've, I think it's A24, whatever the name of the company is.
Well, they probably, I thought the theatrical release was going to qualify it for awards, because, they had Best Puppet Squirrel nailed down.
The Oscars, ever since they've added this extra Best Puppet Squirrel, multiple Puppet Squirrel categories, it's kind of...
Yeah, I thought it was inappropriate when the beaver won.
Oh, what was that? Zombievers. Remember when that won Best Picture? That's a shout out to Zombievers. I highly recommend, if you like trash entertainment exploitation films, watch Zombievers.
So is that a recommendation over Silver Lake?
Yeah. That is a high recommendation for people who would enjoy... If you think to yourself, I might enjoy a movie called Zombievers, oh, you will. It is the Citizen Kane of Zombiever films. There is a main character in this movie who is topless for the majority of the movie, and it starts out...
Ironic in a film about beavers.
It starts off being comical and just becomes commonplace after a certain amount of time. At any rate, practically the final girl character, if you will. So, we're talking about Silver Lake here, Under the Silver Lake. You mentioned that it's sort of a Sam Spade oddball detective movie.
Well, not Sam Spade, specifically Philip Marlowe. Sam Spade is Dashiell Hammett, and this isn't Dashiell Hammett.
You're right. So here's the thing that gets me about this movie, right from the get-go, that I picked up on. It's so highly sexualized. This character goes from sexual event to sexual event.
It's almost James Bondian.
I'd say he has sex more times than James Bond with more people than
Well, he is Andrew Garfield, and Andrew Garfield is dreamy.
What do you think the most people, specifically different people, James Bond has had sex with in one movie is?
In one movie, it's 4. That's his record.
I'm pretty sure Andrew Garfield has sex with more than 4 people in this. At the very least, he specifically lusts after and nearly has sex with more than 4, for sure.
Do you like how I had that figure right on the top of my head that James Bond, his record per film is 4 films?
I tried to brush right past it.
Because he's had as few as 1 in a film.
That's true. We gotta get to that one James Bond movie where he's completely celibate by choice.
They'll do that eventually. They're so determined to ruin that character, they'll do it.
Do you mean perhaps during the trans James Bond movie?
That's someone just proposed, yes. Dominic West, thank you, Dominic West, for proposing that.
I have a feeling Dominic West was being a little cheeky when he recommended
Perhaps,
that.
yeah.
All right, well, we have a lot more to say about this Under the Silver Lake movie, because we found a natural pause point with our Dominic West comment. I think we're going to take a really quick break here to pay the bills. Does that sound good to you?
Sure.
All right.
And we can talk about who Dominic West's favorite radio show is.
I challenge.
We can't imagine.
Challenge accepted.
The Live Center is Concordia's on-campus.
Yeah, when I read that, it's like, yeah, Dominic West. Dominic West has taken a piss on someone, and idiots quoted him.
Be that guy before, so I feel pretty confident.
Yeah.
By the way, I didn't bring this up. He played Bond in a movie.
Did he?
Yeah.
In what?
He played A Bond.
A Bond.
A Bond. In the sequel to Johnny English.
Oh, okay.
He's Bond in that.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing fucking James Bond in that movie. It's a great parody, actually. He does a great job. I was going to say, the same way that Jason Isaacs did in that Jackie Chan tuxedo film.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also not good, but a great parody.
Mm-hmm.
35 seconds.
Discussion about
sounds of cinema?
We'll tune into At the
I don't understand this ad at all. Do we have an ad?
No,
No.
it's up to us. We'd have to make one.
All right. I bet we could do a better one than this. Just saying.
Oh, you need to actually work the machine. Work the machines. I just said machine into the microphone. Actually, no, I turned yours on for a second, so nothing got said. Just for a split second. All right, here we go.
Mhm.
And we're back. You are listening to CJLO's 1690's Cinema Smackdown. I'm Michael Brody. This is my co-host Shane Simmons. We are enjoying a chat about Silver Lake this afternoon, so let's get back to that. All right, so
We're going to end up doing a whole show about Silver Lake early.
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, if we end up doing a whole episode about Silver Lake, let me tell you, this chat about unsung movies of 2018 will be a 15-episode.
Yeah, it'll carry us into 2020.
We have a few more. Let's see how far we can stretch it comfortably. I'm about.
I mean, you're the one who was trying to argue with me. There were no good films this year. I was like, no, we've got a bunch of interesting stuff to talk about.
Silver Lake a good,
I
important movie. It's notable.
Well, compared to what we watched our last cinema excursion.
Oh dear God! Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no,
the people have to know.
Yeah, no, I gotta bring it up.
We saw a double feature.
We saw a double feature, and I found my most hated film of the year, which was Holmes and Watson.
Be fair. Is it really your most hated film of only this year?
It might go back a ways. If you're a Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly fan, you'll be disappointed. If you're a Holmes fan, as I am professionally, you will be appalled beyond speech. I sat there with my head in my hands, groaning softly to myself for the entire 94-minute running time.
Admittedly, to be clear, this could have been any characters. It's so ineptly made that
Yeah.
it hardly needed to be a Sherlock Holmes movie.
Yeah, it had a thin grasp of who these characters were, and an even thinner grasp of the historical context they lived in.
Agreed.
Because remember when Queen Victoria was present for the launching of the Titanic in 1912? Do we remember that?
Look,
If you skip that history class, that was a good one.
if anybody is a fan of Will Ferrell, but you know when he's made a bad movie, the same as, even if you, let's say for instance you're a fan of Adam Sandler, but you know there's good Adam Sandler movies, just a couple, but mostly bad ones. Will Ferrell, I'd say, has a slightly better average of, that's kind of okay, or passable. This is the worst movie Will Ferrell will ever make. I would even go so far as to say it's probably almost the worst movie Adam Sandler could have made, even though he's not in this. But
Imagine
it's
that.
so poor, and I think
Adam Sandler, Rob Schneider.
It's getting a lot of press right now because of how poor the movie is, but this was known a few months ago. The movie Holmes and Watson, upon its completion, was screened for producers who immediately knew it was a huge failure. They tried to dump this movie. They approached Netflix.
Yeah, I heard Netflix would not buy it.
It's the first time ever Netflix said, not good enough for us.
They don't have a very good track record for feature films.
They really do not. Their acquisitions are...
I mean, they're the ones who offered a 4-picture deal to Adam Sandler, and he's produced garbage for them. But this wasn't good enough for them.
Just so you know, he's long past that 4-picture deal. He's into his next
did they re-up it with him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
Because the Adam Sandler movies on Netflix are the films that are viewed the most.
Right.
They are the most successful films they've ever put up.
So it just goes to show you the level of faith Netflix had in this Holmes and Watson project.
All right, that's enough about that. At any rate, we'll spare you...
We'll spare your opinions on Aquaman.
Yeah, which we saw as a double feature with Holmes and Watson. Admittedly better than Holmes and Watson.
Yes.
So, Holmes and Watson, sub Aquaman. That's as good as I can get for my Aquaman review right now. Maybe we'll do Aquaman another day.
Yeah, until Marvel comes along and makes a Submariner film and shows them how it's done.
Oh, God, I hope so. At any rate, so back to Under the Silver Lake, directed by David Robert Mitchell, starring Andrew Garfield. So I mentioned before that I felt like this movie had a slight comic book connection in tone to these Dan Clowes, Charles Burns comics. Now, one of the
it has a very literal comic book moment in it.
Exactly. There's a couple.
Specifically, there's one that's almost too referential.
Where I wasn't even going there.
Yeah. Andrew Garfield wakes up and has an interaction with a Spider-Man comic.
Yeah, that was a little heavy-handed for my taste, or a little meta.
It was a little cute. Mind you, when I was watching it, I had to remind myself, oh, right, Andrew Garfield played Spider-Man, because the less said about those films, the better.
The actual reference specifically of the title, I believe, to Under the Silver Lake is in a local zine, which is filled with comic pages that Garfield's character finds.
Right. Yeah.
He's obsessed with this.
Yeah. Zine culture actually
zine
plays
culture.
Plays an important role
Zine
in this film.
culture is close to comic book culture, and they touch on both in this very briefly. But at any rate, it's still part of the story. And so how do we go about this? What is he has a missing girl mystery in this. Essentially, Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, he lives in a little apartment complex in L.A.
He kind of hooks up with somebody part way, and then that girl leaves, and then she's vanished. And he that's what fuels.
And he starts
him
looking into it.
to look into it, but it's also connected to this lore of death from the past, this Under the Silver Lake kind of urban legend almost. Is that how you
Right.
put it?
Yeah. There's urban legendy stuff in it, including this reservoir and a weird naked woman with an owl head, bizarro.
Middle-aged too. Oh no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of a different naked woman in the movie.
Oh, okay, yes,
Go
yeah,
on,
no,
go
yeah.
ahead.
There's multiple naked women. This one, something straight out of a modern weird monster movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lots of conspiracy theory type stuff, and it's quite the mishmash, and yet it didn't lose me.
Oh god, no. If you're a film fan, if you like interesting cinematography, solid as a rock sequences, fine performances overall, everybody works in this movie. It's a pretty mesmerizing film. It's just at the end, do you like it? Right? I fell into. I did like it, but I found it also. I like to talk to people about film. I like to recommend things. This is a rough recommend. You pretty much have to say, yeah, try it, but tonally, I know that my friends who like straightforward films are gonna get annoyed.
Yeah.
And that's to their loss.
But I think it doesn't go over that hump into artistic pretentiousness.
No,
which many of
modern
these
David
type of
Lynch
films
does.
might have done, yeah.
Modern David Lynch, a lot of these.
However, I fully expect that less devoted cinemaphiles, if I recommended this to them, they would come back at me with it. That was the worst movie I've ever seen.
Right.
Because everyone who sees a movie they don't like now has to say it's the worst film they've ever seen.
It's the Hitler of movies.
Yeah, exactly. It does irritate me. Everything has to be 10-star, 1-star.
Right. So getting back to the weird plot of Silver Lake, I don't think I want to get too deep into spoilers, but there's so many things to at least touch on. So the underlying thing of this movie that really weirded me out is movies sometimes will set up an expectation. They'll say, okay, remember, this guy's lonely and he's going to fall in love. That might be an expectation in a movie. But in this film, Andrew Garfield starts off the film by getting essentially a warning. He hasn't paid his rent, and if he doesn't find a way to pay his rent soon, he's going to be evicted. And he lives in this nice little apartment in an apartment complex, and you get this impression, at least in that scene, that this is a big deal to him. But he never makes a move forward to try to find employment.
He doesn't lift a finger
He doesn't
to try
lift a
to...
finger. And he gets repeatedly warned throughout the film that the deadline is coming, and he pleads for more time. He speaks to different people during the movie that might be able to help him out. His mother calls him repeatedly, and he never. He's constantly, essentially,
It's kind of
having
this
a
constant
facade of confidence.
Yeah, it's a constant source of anxiety. It's something that creates anxiety for the
Exactly.
viewer as you watch it, saying, "Oh my God, take care of that, take care of that, take care of that."
It's the
I'm
only
sure
thing I can
that's
think about
intentional.
in giant sequences of the movie is I live in fear of my rent issue, just having that problem, getting into bad graces with my landlord, being evicted, showing up at home and finding a padlock on my front door, that kind of thing. That's more of a scare for me than imminent death, because it's an imminent reality.
It's your Saw movie.
Yeah, there you go. So when they present that at the beginning of the movie and then don't answer that question and continue to not answer it, and they continue to remind you of the situation by having the county sheriff shows up to evict him at a certain point, and he pleads with her for 24 more hours, and she grudgingly allows him one last chance. So what does he do with this last window of opportunity? He goes right back to trying to solve the mystery. It doesn't. So you keep expecting, well, maybe he'll stumble into a treasure chest of cash or something.
It's almost like some of those horror films that play a low-level noise throughout to try and keep you unnerved.
Yeah,
And it has that effect on you.
so bringing it up, I gotta say, part of bringing it up infuriated me throughout the running time of the movie, and yet it certainly kept me interested. It kept me asking that question. And I'm not going to say how it resolves because it's a key piece of the last 10 minutes of the film. Is what they do to resolve this. And it's odd. It's certainly not what I would have expected. At any rate, that's enough said about that. Let's bring up other strange things like...
Well, certainly we were mentioning how Netflix does not have a terrific track record for Netflix original films. Netflix original TV shows they do, but the original films not so much. And yet, some of the films on our list of the interesting, undiscussed films of the year.
Are we done with Silver Lake?
Oh, we could be. I mean,
I wasn't done.
Oh my God, really?
I just meant I didn't want to stop there. Yeah, with just one more.
Okay.
One or two.
Hit me.
More. I just want to bring up one other thing, because. Okay, you can call this a spoiler. So if you're really worried about seeing this movie, I just need to make a record of having talked about this sequence.
Okay.
It's not the end of the movie. It's an hour before the end. While investigating this, Andrew Garfield stumbles on to a man in a house sitting behind a piano. This sequence is clearly one of the more interesting and important things I've seen this year. It's about a 5 or 10 minute scene where he chats with somebody who sits behind a piano for the entire scene. I had to look up all of the information about the scene that I could find. There's not a lot online. The actor who's sitting behind the piano, his name is Jeremy Bobb. I think he's referenced as the piano player or something like that in the credits. But he is a youngish actor. I'd say he might be 40, but he's wearing prosthetic old man makeup and looks like old Biff Tannen from Back to the Future 2.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
And he starts to talk about the fact that every hit song that has ever been recorded in the history since, I don't know where they start.
Because he goes back. Because
he's an old man.
Yeah, he plays a lot of tunes that you've heard before, claiming responsibility for them.
For all of them, including Nirvana's "Smells Like Teen Spirit," some Elvis songs, some catchy.
Because a lot of the film is a scathing criticism of pop culture.
Correct.
And I had that moment in that scene where going, oh, well, how far back is this guy going to go? Because it's like, surely there was a moment when music was pure, and then he starts playing a segment of Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And he's claiming credit for that, too.
It makes this surreal film even more surreal. I don't 100% understand why this sequence is in the movie. I don't know. At this moment, I can't even remember how we get there, where it goes from there. But it is just one more oddball puzzle piece in a series of oddball puzzle pieces. And
Did we mention you'll hate this film?
No, I don't think everyone will hate this movie.
No, there's going to be a few out there who go, oh, thank you for recommending that.
But I will tell you, there are friends of mine...
The rest of them will send bombs to the radio station.
There are friends of mine I wouldn't recommend the movie to, but I would show them this 10-minute scene. This piano player having a brisk, angry chat with Andrew Garfield about what the world deserves in terms of pop culture and his place in it. It is a both magical and terrifying sequence. I'd say better than most things I've seen in David Lynch movies in that sense of, what is this? How did we get here? I'm so uncomfortable. So with that, I think we can leave Silver Lake for the moment. And let's get to your comment about...
You're right, though. That scene needed mentioning specifically.
And, speaking of David Lynch and David... who was it? David Robert Mitchell... these guys, they do have things in common, but the number one thing they have in common, they're both huge fans of Cinema Smackdown on CJLO 1690.
Yeah,
I like to bring it up whenever I can because a plug from David Lynch means the world to me.
Yeah, we should mention, though, David Lynch only listens to the show backwards.
And mostly hoping we will mention the weather. That's his fascination. If you don't, do you know this? David Lynch does the weather on a radio show.
Okay. Well, he needs to make ends meet.
at least he has in the past, on a daily basis at 9 a.m., a radio station would phone David Lynch, or he would phone in, and they would say, and now, local weatherman, David Lynch. And David Lynch's weatherman bit was to literally look out his window and describe what he was seeing. And he did this for, I believe, years, if he's not still doing it. So yeah.
Cloudy with a chance of dancing midgets.
All right, Shane. Let's talk Netflix original movies.
Okay.
And we will get to the next film in our list of movies that are a little bit unappreciated in 2018.
Oh, which one do you want to do?
Oh,
Or do you want me to suggest one?
I want you to suggest one, but I
Okay, well, also another interesting follow-up film from a filmmaker we like that we sat down to watch together was Hold the Dark.
Oh, okay, we're doing more than
The
one.
Jeremy, there's several I'd care to talk about.
I just thought you were going to do the one you watched last night.
Oh, well, I could do that too, but...
Hey, you said the title, we're committed, let's
Sure,
go.
sure.
So Jeremy Saulnier did Hold the Dark.
He's the guy who did Green Room and Blue Ruin prior to this.
Correct.
Not to mention Murder Party.
True. But
we'll talk about his more accomplished films, yeah.
But there's also the minimal connection to I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore.
Right. His
chief screenwriter.
frequent collaborator, Macon Blair.
Yeah, and there's no film without Macon Blair. There's no Jeremy Saulnier movie, I don't think, that hasn't at least touched Macon Blair.
Right, and Macon Blair worked on... This was an adaptation of a novel.
Right.
And Macon Blair appears briefly in the film, as he's apt to do in Jeremy Saulnier films. And
so let's see. Hold the Dark stars Jeffrey Wright, as well as Alexander Skarsgård. Who else am I forgetting? I'm just doing this off the top of my head. It might be Riley Keough. I'm not sure. Which would be somebody who's also in Under the Silver Lake. It might be the same female lead in both movies. Don't quote me on this. I'm not IMDbing it as we speak, but it might be the same lady. At any rate, Jeffrey Wright is certainly the star of the movie.
Yes.
Oh, and in a key cameo, as there is in every single one of these movies, is Macon Blair. He always has a scene.
As I mentioned,
lead part in 1.5 movies. He's the lead in Blue Ruin, and he's got a pretty key part in Green Room.
Yeah.
Now, just to put this out there, I liked Blue Ruin. It was an interesting film. It certainly made me say, well, whatever the next thing this guy does, I'll check it out at least. I wasn't won over by it, but I liked it.
I had a higher opinion than you
but
on that.
When I saw Green Room...
Green Room's quite extraordinary.
It was so much more than I asked for in one movie. So much more intense. We've talked about it on this show before. It was probably my favorite film of that year, which I want to say was 2016, I think. But the following...
Maybe even 15.
Here's the amazing thing is that the following year, Macon Blair's directorial debut film, I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, was easily my favorite film of that year.
Yep.
So these guys are batting 1,000 in terms of this. So 2018, their newest collaboration...
I think it's safe to say that anything they do from here on out, we're in for. Even if they make a string of bombs.
They've earned a pass for life.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as I once said about M. Night Shyamalan after seeing Unbreakable. Boy, do I regret saying that now. 7 movies into his horror disgust period.
And we're still showing up.
Yeah, I know. Well, no, you're not. You haven't done the last 3.
I'm behind, but I remain a reluctant advocate.
Yeah,
that
places.
At least no one is making his films except him.
True. All right, so Jeremy Saulnier directed Hold the Dark. We mentioned the stars. Let's just tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the tone.
It is an extremely slow, deliberate-paced film. It certainly takes its time. When the violence happens, as is the case with all of their films, they make you wait for it, and then when the violence happens, it is to a degree of realistic horror. It's not glorified violence. They don't do glorified violence. They do really uncomfortable, upsetting violence. And it does not hold back when it happens. It's an interesting little tale about a hunter. A hunter, yeah, who is specifically hired to hunt a wolf that is suspected of having killed and taken away a child. And he arrives in this little Alaskan town.
I think the word sleepy might apply there.
Yeah, sleepy indeed. to look into it, and quickly we see stranger things are afoot.
That's a good way to put it. Now, my general take on this movie is, professionally speaking, it is a near perfect film. It is gorgeous. Every sequence is intriguing and visual and pulling me further in. These guys are getting so good at telling stories for movies.
Extremely well made, extremely well acted.
Extremely well acted. It doesn't make a lick of sense. I'm going to self-censor. This movie doesn't make a lick of sense. They present you intriguing ideas and then abandon them. It feels like this entire movie is an allegory for something that I do not understand.
I will say yes, it is a very allegorical film.
It is as weird
it's
and
probably
complicated.
why I've mentioned on the heels of Silver Lake, because
Yeah.
they're both difficult films in that there's a lot to absorb and think about in both of them. Whereas Silver Lake is a more quirky approach, whereas Hold the Dark has a more, I would say profound. Whether it comes down to whether you think there's real substance here or not. I think there is. I think they're too good a filmmaker duo to not have real substance lurking below the surface. But it is difficult to wrap your head around exactly what they're going for. Now, part of this may be that they're working from different source material. It's not their own original material. So they are also tasked with being faithful to the intentions of an author that I don't know how closely associated they might have been with him, or if they talked about, so what are you driving at here?
Well,
If they came up with their own idea of what he was driving at, or if there was a communication. Because it does play, unlike Silver Lake, there's not surface bizarro stuff that happens.
but it does get there.
But it does get there, yeah. It ultimately comes down to, it's not that anything weird happens in the film. It's more that you're left trying to struggle with the motivations of the characters. Why did you do this? Mm-hmm. What is your goal here? Why are you striving for this? How did you end up here?
Well, here's the thing for me. One of the things that carries me through movies is character motivation and asking questions that, at least as a viewer in some capacity, I can find an answer to. There are things that happen in this movie where characters do stuff, and I find myself saying, well, I don't know how we got to this moment. And then they do the thing, I don't understand it, and then when we come away from it, it's never explained. And this happens so many times in this movie where characters just make choices that don't really logically work for me, that ultimately, I guess my review is, I don't like this movie. But that's not all there is to say about it. It's so much more interesting than that. I can talk about it for 2 hours. There's so many points. But at the end, I don't understand it. And when you say to yourself, sometimes a movie's just weird. You go, oh, it's weird. I get it, it's weird. This case, though, I'm just going to bring up one particular moment in the movie. There is a scene in this film where a character goes on a small murder spree.
I would say there's
the small
the small murder scene.
The small
Because
murder spree scene.
there's a
giant
larger murder spree
there's
as
a giant
well.
murder
Yeah.
spree scene. But later on, there's a small murder spree scene where at the end of the sequence, this character, having killed a couple of people, slides a mask over his face and stands in the moonlight, I think covered in blood perhaps, wearing a mask, baptized in this moment, becoming this force of death. Which I totally understood. I was like, oh, okay, I get where this is going in the movie. This makes sense. But the immediate follow-up scene is that character, no mask anymore, dressed in street clothes, walking out to his car, being accosted by another character, and reacting like a dummy. Like, duh, I don't really know what's happening in this moment, and I feel goofy. And I could not put those two scenes together.
We can't all be Jason Voorhees 24 hours a day.
Yeah, but it was not the way for my take on things. Character-wise, you don't go from this moment of ascension right back to a very odd reality moment that doesn't connect to it. So that is, for me, the most egregious sin that movie commits is that sequence. Where it lost me completely in that moment. I just don't know what you're trying to say at this point.
Well, meanwhile, see, it should be mentioned that the mask in that scene that reoccurs is a wolf mask. Mm-hmm. And that led me to ask you the question after we finished watching the film. Is like, is this secretly a werewolf movie? And I don't mean literally people transforming, but more like a mental transformation.
A dual personality.
And if you take it as a werewolf, again, allegorical type of film, then that scene would be, yes, this is him as the wolf, and now here he is, because the moon's gone down. He's back to being a regular dude.
Right.
He's back to being Larry Talbot.
I mean, there's so much that we could say about that movie. I think just saying that it's a movie made by two filmmakers at the top of their craft, but you have to be okay with a movie that is not necessarily going to answer your questions. It's going to bring things up that come from nowhere, and you have to be cool with that. I mean, that is a rough point for me. I like to have a more clear understanding of... I can be confused, I can be left without explanations, but there are so many dangling threads in this one.
Mm-hmm.
There are characters who show up, act completely nonsensically, go make entire massacres happen, and vanish from the film. I have no understanding for how that is a piece of this movie at all. It is a great, great sequence that I just don't get.
Yeah, well, it does smell of one of those films that needs to be revisited several times if you're really going to grasp what's going on here.
Or, honestly, just...
And I do look forward to seeing it again. Enough time has passed at this point that...
I would either read that book or read a detailed synopsis of it at this point to find out if these details are in that book.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say, right? It's hard to say if this is a pure adaptation or a loose adaptation of what was done. And I haven't read interviews. I don't know what their intentions were with this film. Because this movie was Netflix, it is interesting that the publicity machine, it doesn't kick in quite as hard as it does for a theatrical release. Where
yeah, it's weird.
Have to do tours.
Netflix kind of likes to surprise you with movies. With the exception of Bright, which they promote the hell out of.
Well, because I think it was a $30 or $50 million movie, or maybe it was a $100 million movie.
Yeah, no. That piece of crap was a hard sell.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff, they like to surprise their subscribers, saying, hey, here's a new film.
Right.
I was like, oh, I didn't know this was coming at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was aware of Hold the Dark for 6 months or more before the...
Yeah, well, no, I right from the moment they signed with Netflix to make original content for them, it's like, okay, because we're eager, whatever these guys do, I'm in. So,
And it hasn't changed. They're continuing. Jeremy Saulnier will be directing the first 2 episodes of the 3rd season of True Detective this year. Unfortunately, he was supposed to direct all 10, but they said there was a conflict in terms of his scheduling, which I think is code for something went horribly wrong, because they've replaced him with another director, but it's a co-directing gig between this new director and the writer of the series, who's never directed before. So I believe the writer probably had issues with what Saulnier was doing and wanted to take a more firm grasp of it, which might be...
Yeah, it's always hard to
better or
read the
worse.
tea leaves about what's going on
It
behind
might
the
be
scenes
for
and these
better or
things.
worse, but I'm certainly going to be tuning in to see those first 2 shows. I mean, who am I kidding? I'm going to watch the whole series. True Detective is excellent. But... excellent, or at least, much like Hold the Dark, one of those things where I don't always like it, but I'm always happy to be watching something at this level of craft. I think that's a good place to stop for talking about Hold the Dark.
Sure,
Do you have another
sure,
thought?
sure.
So, let's do a quick break, pay the bills again, and we'll come back with a little chat about the newest Garth Evans?
Yeah, Garth Evans. Yeah, that's the Garth.
We will get back with Garth Evans, and we won't be doing any of that. We'll get back right after these messages from our robot overlords.
Are you looking to advertise your upcoming event at an affordable price?
This is going great.
Mm-hmm. Good, good.
Got you covered.
This
From on-air ads to
doesn't
website
feel
headers,
fake
even
anymore.
live
Okay.
broadcasts,
I told you I've been
got
having
it
issues where
all.
we do shows and I feel
Check
like I
out
feel weird. We're not talking to each other.
www.cjlo.advertise
Mhm.
for more
And today
information
we're
and the ways
only
we can
talking
help
to each
you
other.
promote
I'm
your
a
event.
lot happier.
Okay, well,
I don't know
just-
if you're feeling it.
No, yeah, you know, I mean, I've always been content in general.
I just don't feel as awkward.
Well, we just need to make sure that Tess remains murdered in a ditch.
Oh
So.
geez, this is the button song? That's like the perfect...
Oh, don't worry, YouTube will get that.
Oh god. I forgot you really are recording this, you monster.
Yeah.
Are you going with the YouTube quality copies?
9 a.m.
Well, for the time being, yeah.
You haven't switched yet?
No, because I need to learn the editing
We
program.
are 10 seconds away. It comes
Yes,
and goes pretty quick.
I have not had enough time to learn new software.
And we're back. You were listening to CJLO 1690's Cinema Smackdown. I'm Michael Brody. This is Shane Simmons. And I just remembered that even when we're off air, Shane is recording us and posting these on his YouTube channel with our outtakes, which means some of the crazy things we joked about in the last chunk are now going to be on air.
Which may or may not be criminal.
Oh dear. So glad that we're doing this.
It'll come up in the court case.
It will make for some very interesting audio transcripts during the court case. Definitely. All right, let's take the last 15 minutes that we've got and talk a little bit about Apostle. Because
this is another follow-up film by a filmmaker we do follow closely.
And oh boy, is this ever an attempt to do something different?
Oh yeah, this is definitely a change of pace. So Gareth Evans is a Welsh filmmaker who relocated to Indonesia and made a string of really intense action films. Starting,
let's stick with the most famous one.
Yeah, well, The Raid is, of course, the one everyone knows, but there was The Raid 2 as well. And before that, there was a smaller film called Marantau that he did. So 3 action films, balls to the walls, full-on, stabby, fighty, hitting people with every extremity you could possibly can, in the face, in the groin, and anywhere. Super violent. And then he did a Netflix original film called The Apostle, which takes place, I thought it was 1800s, but apparently, according to the synopsis, it's 1905. Mm-hmm. And it is about a man traveling to a British Isles refuge for a cult, a Christian cult, that has kidnapped his sister. And he's sneaking there as one of their followers in order to determine her location, rescue her, and get her off that island. Yeah. Now, it sounds pretty straightforward.
It should be mentioned that Gareth Evans not just directed; he wrote this. It's not based on any existing material. It's 100% his. It stars Dan Stevens, who is fairly famous for having been on Downton Abbey, and he has quite a character arc on that show. And also, more recently, playing the lead on Legion, the weird Marvel hybrid show that's on, I want to say FX maybe, or something else. And he's also recently... This was the big turning point in Dan Stevens' career. He appeared in a movie called The Guest, which is by the filmmakers of You're Next, and a few other things. House of the Devil, maybe? I think it's the same guys. Okay. At any rate... No, it's not the same guy. Same family of directors, but not the same guy, I don't think. So, at any rate, Dan Stevens appeared in the Guest with a small ensemble, but in this movie, he does an American accent. He kind of shrugs off that Downton Abbey-ness and becomes such a legitimate leading man character, or a force to be reckoned with. He plays a soldier who's come back from some sort of military thing, but what they don't tell you up front is that he is essentially now Michael Myers. He is a killing machine. But he is so good in this film, and so charismatic, so strange, that you go, well, this may not be the best movie I've ever seen. Again, this is The Guest. But Dan Stevens, he's a movie star now. That's the film where you say, there's no way this guy doesn't become a movie star after this. So now we're talking about his newest, biggest film, The Apostle, where he plays the lead. He's in every scene, pretty much.
Right. I should mention it also stars a typically unrecognizable Michael Sheen.
Why typically unrecognizable?
I find he's becoming the Gary Oldman of disappearing into parts for me.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
You know, to go from playing like sexy werewolf dude in the Underworld movies to playing David Frost and Frost Nixon, it's hard to believe that's the same dude.
I will say that while Dan Stevens plays a pretty straightforward character who has an arc that is pretty clean, he only really wants one thing in this movie and moves towards it. Michael Sheen's character jumps around from motivation to motivation where you can't really predict.
He's an interesting character in this.
Yeah, you can't really... He's not one thing.
He's not fully villainous. He's certainly not fully redeemed.
And he's certainly not a good guy.
No, he's not, but he's not fully a bad guy either. It's compared to some of the other characters. You figure, okay, he's going to be the cult leader, and he's going to be a monster, and he's not
Right.
quite.
So, just quickly, the basic plot is that Dan Stevens goes to an island that's inhabited by a cult to find his sister.
Yeah. She's been kidnapped. Basically, they're trying to sustain their cult
Oh, right.
on the land, completely autonomous from any government or any taxable thing, and any source of authority. And they just want to live off the land, but the land is failing. And the elders, the three guys who founded this, who are themselves ex-convicts who sort of ended up on this place and decided to build a new society there. They sort of hatch on this not terribly well-conceived plan. Let's kidnap a woman from a rich family. We will ransom her back. We'll get money, and then through our smuggling, like black market sources, we will get things we need for the island, and we won't tell anyone that, by the way, we have to supplement what we're trying to do here with outside help because things are not going terribly well.
So Dan Stevens arrives, and I like to make little jokes like, and hijinks ensue, but chaos ensues. It is rough. This movie is grueling in places. It is unrelenting horror moments.
Yeah, it is a slow burn that, again, when the violence comes, is horrible and unsettling and at times crosses the line almost into torture porn.
Yes, but the thing is, it's one of those movies where you're definitely rooting for people to at least make it.
Yes.
But its willingness to injure or kill characters who you feel are integral to this plot is...
It's like, surely they won't do anything too horrible to this character. Oh, yes, they will.
Yeah, and it's as I say, it's pretty unrelenting. It's uncompromising in that sense. Now, for those of us who've watched enough entertainment or media, it's pretty common to see a main character end up in what might be called a death trap. Something like the old Adam West Batman show, where nearly every episode would end with him tied to a rocket about to go off, or to a conveyor belt that's heading into a furnace, that sort of thing. This movie has one or more scenes like this that will test you. They will make you feel something. There's no way to watch that scene without almost feeling like you should be closing your eyes, wincing, being uncomfortable. But boy, would I have loved to have seen Adam West's Batman get out of a situation the way one of the characters gets out of one in this.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fully committing to some moment to save your own life. You have to let something happen before you can get out of the death trap.
Yeah, that's just it. It enters that sort of Saw level of torture porn where it's like, well, how far are you willing to go to survive?
And it is very successful. I will not say that I consider this whole movie to be successful, but it is indeed.
Yeah, it's not something... Whereas the other two, I'm sure I'm going to ultimately show people. I don't think I'm going to show people this one in particular.
I will say this, and this is important to me. This movie works on a number of levels, and the violence works on a number of levels, but it becomes clear, I'd say during the spearing scene, specifically, and going forward, and the spearing scene is incredibly well achieved. That sequence is wonderful. You know what I'm talking about.
There's an attempted assassination? Yes, okay.
There's a spearing moment in this, which is so brutal, so swift, so well executed, haha, pun, little pun there, that I was definitely brought further into the movie of, okay, what comes next? However, it's really clear when you watch that scene they're using CGI. And the moment I feel a hint of CGI in something, it takes a whole layer away from what I'm feeling for a movie. Now, if you watch The Raid, I don't know how much CGI there is in that, but when someone kicks someone in the chest in that movie, it's not one of those films where you see a roundhouse and the actor reacts. You will literally see people kicking each other in the chest, in the face. The Raid is not pulling punches.
Yeah, you will see someone stab someone in the upper arm and draw it down the entire length of their arm.
Exactly, and you will watch that scene and you'll recoil because it's real. There's a reality at play here. Whereas Apostle has moments like this, a lot of them, but because they're interspersed with slight CGI here and there, always takes me out. Just a
Well,
hint.
in
I
the-
really regret that in a movie that's this visceral.
Yeah, in the slight CGI category, there is a couple of moments fairly early on where it tips his hand and basically says, "Yeah, there's a supernatural element here." And now, I don't want to second judge the entire film because ultimately that plays a major part in the film. But I would have preferred this film if it had been 100% set in the real world. This is about a guy going into a cult to get his sister
Oh
out.
no, I will tell you, I would have been okay with the supernatural-ish element of this had there been no computer work done. I will say that there are key elements of the last 10 minutes where there is something or several things happen, and they're intriguing ideas. And had they been accomplished with prosthetics and or camera trickery, I think I would have been won over.
Yeah, I would have
But
liked that much better.
seeing CGI spring out of stuff just takes me out. It makes me feel, compare.
It's not super egregious, but it's just one of those where we need to show
something extreme.
related to the famine aspect of the film, that there's some plant growth that happens in front of you, and had it been accomplished by, say, genuine time-elapse photography, that would have been amazing.
Exactly.
But here it's accomplished by CG. It seems like a shortcut.
It just feels the physics are never really right. The only time CGI is good is when you don't know it's there. And there are plenty of examples of that if you listen to commentary tracks and watch enough films. You see things, so that looks great, and then the director says, yeah, we did CGI, and you say, oh, I had no idea. But the moment you feel that box is open...
Right.
It's crippling to the tone. And I understand that modern audiences are getting more and more used to it, but it's the moment someone makes a movie with no CGI, it just has a different feeling to it. At any rate, it's one of those soapboxes I stand on a little too often, but it certainly is something I would say for this particular movie. It would have gone up a whole point or two in my estimation had it not relied on that moment.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, Apostle's worth seeing.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting film. Like I said, I won't go out of my way to show it to people, but I do recommend you have a look, because presumably if you're listening to the show, you are a cinemaphile, you will care. So, yeah, Gareth Evans, he's an interesting filmmaker.
I'll see the next one.
I'll certainly see anything else he makes from now on.
Alright, well on that note, we will continue this conversation next week, not about Apostle, but about many, many other notable films of 2018
that
didn't
no
get
one
enough
else
press.
bothered to talk about, yeah.
This is a good time, I think, to do a couple of plugs. So, as I've said before, I'm going to mention a few things. I'm going to mention a thing every week on the air. I am going to try to remember.
I hear there's some best damn pub quiz in Montreal.
That's right. So I do a pub quiz every Sunday night at 9:15 at Grumpy's. It's 1242 Bishop Street, smack dab in between Peel and Guy Metro, just off St. Catherine Street. We do pub trivia there. I do a lot of movie questions, and I try to do a little movie question shout-out every week. And this is the one I'm going to do tonight. It's a little hint for tonight. If you look this up, you'll have an edge on anybody else who shows up. Look up Harry Trasker. He's a character from movies. You might remember his name outright, you might not. There's going to be a question related to him, and if you remember who he is, you'll have that question sewn up. So that's my little hint for tonight. That's the pub quiz at Grumpy's at 9:15 every Sunday.
There's your cheat sheet.
There's your one little cheat sheet moment. So that's my gig. We do Cinema Smackdown every Sunday, and then I take a little break and go off and do pub trivia. It's the day of the week where I do the most talking. Shane, you want a quick plug in the 20 seconds we have left?
It was a good day for you to start drinking in the morning.
That's right. So I am going to be fully liquored up by the time the pub quiz starts tonight.
Yeah, well, I'm still in edits for Epitaph, the sequel to Necropolis, so that'll be out sometime in January, I imagine. Mm-hmm. And if you want to prime yourself for reading that sequel, check out Necropolis by Shane Simmons on Amazon. Your local Amazon outlet, anywhere in the world. It's there in Kindle Unlimited and in paperback.
Highly recommended. I cannot be bought as a reviewer or a critic, but I will say, without any kind of financial motivation, I quite like Shane's work, and I recommend that everybody give it a go.
That's all right.
That's the end of our show for today. I'm Michael Brody. This has been Shane Simmons. I have greatly enjoyed this little chat. We will see you again next week.
90 a.m. in Montreal.
I was about a split second late on that one.
Oh, no.
Oh, actually, I was perfect.
No.
Special
Damn it, I was hoping the CRTC would come for us.
That was a pretty good show.
Yeah, we did.
I was really happy with the results of that. Because I didn't
Hey,
feel
thanks for tuning in to CJ
like
Alert.
half of what I
We
was
wanna
saying
take a
was
second
sort of
to talk about some of the
trailing out.
charities that
The
need
issue
help
I've been
this
having, I
holiday
felt a
season.
little better in
Welcome
January.
Holiday provides
And I got
those
plenty of
who
notes
need
I'm going to
fresh
actually leave in our
groceries,
cubbyhole for next
warm
week.
meals, shelter